Good morning. Today is November the 15th, 2021. I'm Frank Farmer, and we're here today as part of the Veterans History Project. This is a project authorized by Congress and administered by the Library of Congress. Today our guest is Mr. Robert Vogel. If that name sounds familiar, it should. He was Sheriff of Volusia County from 1988 to 2001, and he's here today to tell us his story of his Marine service and his service in Vietnam. So, Mr. Vogel, thank you very much for being here today and allowing us to hear your story.
Well, thank you, Dr. Farmer. It's an honor to be here, especially to be interviewed by you. I've admired you for many, many years, and your military career is well known. You've attained the rank of colonel while you served in the military.
Oh my gosh.
You headed up the Medical Society for the state of Florida, and you were the first the doctor and
Surgeon General.
Surgeon General.
Surgeon
Got
General.
that.
Well, that,
for the state of Florida.
That was all very kind of you. I appreciate that. But let's get back to your story. You're from Pennsylvania, if I remember. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when did you decide to go into the Marine Corps, and when did you go into the Marine Corps?
Well, after I graduated from high school, I attended electronics school in Pittsburgh, and I was studying karate and delivering, driving a truck in the daytime when I wasn't in school. And my instructor, karate instructor, both of them were former Marines. So that's how I got encouraged to go in the Corps. Well, just before I enlisted, I received a notice from the government saying that they're going to be drafting more people, and you might be called upon within 2 or 3 months.
What year was that?
It was 1966.
Okay.
And so I waited about a week, and I went down and enlisted in the Marine Corps. So,
is anybody else in your family had been in the Marine Corps? Your father or any relatives?
No, I had my uncles, my father, and a great uncle all served. My great uncle served in WW1, and my uncles served in WW2, and I had one uncle that served in the Korea War.
So you were how old at the time you entered the Marine Corps?
I think I just turned 19.
And where did you go for your basic training?
Well, that was Parris Island, South Carolina.
Well, we've all heard about Parris Island, so tell us a little bit about your recruit training at Parris Island.
Well, the Marine Corps was drafting a lot at that period of time in 1966, and they needed bodies basically for service in Vietnam. They reduced the training from 12 weeks to 8 weeks, and then after that we go to advanced infantry training in South Carolina, or North Carolina rather, and it was intense training. Parris Island. It was mental and physical.
Well, that was 1966. The war in Vietnam was really reaching its, getting ramped up in 1966. The troops numbers were going up. More people were going there. So you were pretty sure, I think, when you went to Parris Island that you knew you were going to Vietnam, didn't you?
I did. Although I didn't go right away to Vietnam. Everybody that goes through basic boot camp in the Marine Corps, everybody has to go through advanced infantry training because everybody's a basic rifleman in the Corps. And so those of us on the East Coast, we all go to North Carolina, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for advanced infantry training. Those on the West Coast go to Camp Pendleton.
Now you said that at that time the Marine Corps was starting to have some draftees, people that have been drafted. Traditionally, the Marine Corps is a completely all volunteer.
Right.
But at that time, they were having to put some draftees. So you went through basic training with some people who had been drafted into the Marine Corps. Did you notice any difference with that group as opposed to the complete volunteers?
Well, I enlisted for 3 years. We did have a couple in our platoon 2 or 3 that were drafted in the Corps. The drill instructors came down on those draftees pretty hard.
I mean, harder than they did on the others?
Harder, yes, because the Corps has always been volunteer, men and women, and so they tuned them up. I'll say that over that 8-week period, and they became ingrained as to be a team player. And the Marine Corps operates as a unit. Depending on where you're assigned, but also too, the Corps is you have a buddy system where you partner with a buddy, and you always have a buddy that you can count on to back you up as part of the entire team. So that's the way the Corps has pretty much been functioning for all these years.
So when you went through basic training, you've already said it was shortened from 12 weeks to 8 weeks because of the need for people to be sent to Vietnam to
Yes.
get through. And you also said that after you finished your basic training, you went to advanced infantry training, which was at Camp Lejeune?
Yes, that was, I stayed there for 4 weeks, Camp Lejeune.
Do you remember your drill instructors?
I do.
Almost every person that went through Parris Island, I think, remembers their drill instructors.
Yeah, the senior DI and the other ones, yes. Yeah.
Do you ever have any contact with them after all these years, or ever hear from them or hear about them?
No, but some buddies, we all got together a few years ago, about 3 years ago, and I contacted the base commander in Parris Island, because it was 50 years, almost to the day that we were there. And so I contacted the base commander, and they rolled out the red carpet for me and my 3 other buddies, and we went up there and saw graduation and gave us a complete tour of the base, which doesn't resemble the base when we went through it.
Now, so after you completed your advanced infantry training, did you go to any other schools, any other technical schools?
I did. I guess because I could type, they sent me to teletype operator school in MCRD in San Diego, and I was there for 3 months. And that was the last time I saw a teletype the whole time I was in the Corps.
So you were trained to be a teletype, and you never saw a teletype after that?
Never saw a teletype after that. From MCRD, San Diego, I was sent to Camp Pendleton. The Marine Corps, at that time, they had 4 divisions. 2 of them were active combat divisions, the 1st and the 3rd Division. The 2nd Marine Corps Division was the Air Wing, and the 4th was Reserve. And in WW2, they had 2 more divisions, the 5th and the 6th. And so Camp Pendleton was resurging the 5th Marine Division. And so I was sent to Camp Pendleton as one of the earlier people to fill a spot in the 5th Marine Division. Well, after being there for a little over a year, a friend of mine, Mickey Tidwell from Alabama, he said, we're in the Corps, we need to go to Vietnam. So we went down to our captain and we said, we want to volunteer. They said, well, they're not looking for your MOS. Well, we said, well, change our MOS to an 03 or something. We want to go to Vietnam.
You volunteered to go to Vietnam?
Volunteered to go to Vietnam. And about a week later or so, we got our orders to go to Vietnam, but we had to go through jungle warfare training first.
Where was that?
That was in Camp Pendleton. That was a couple weeks, a 2-week training for Vietnam.
So when what do you remember the month, the year that you went to Vietnam?
I do. The training would have encompassed probably January of '67, and then December '67, and then in end of January we were going to Vietnam.
Was that January of '67 or January?
I'm sorry, the training started in December, but it carried through into January, and I took some time off in January and left about the end of January for Vietnam.
67 or 68?
68.
So that was January of '68 was the Tet Offensive in Vietnam.
Right.
That was the kind of in my view, the turning point in the Vietnam War with a lot of resistance to the Vietnam War beginning to build up in the United States. Although the Tet Offensive was a military defeat for the North Vietnamese and the North Viet Cong, but I guess strategically they considered it to be a victory because it started turning a lot of people against the war or having resistance to the war. So you went, and that was when things were really heated up in Vietnam, and you went over there right at that time. But you didn't go over there, as you've already said, you didn't go over there as a teletype. What was your MOS when you went over there?
Well, I was we landed in Okinawa, and I was really sick, so I went to the sick bay, and it turned out I had pneumonia, so I spent about a week in a hospital there in Okinawa. So by the time I get to Vietnam, landing in Da Nang, it's the first part of February. And so the assignment was there after I disembarked from the aircraft. They said, you give the people your name and so forth, and there were Marines there. They said, you're going up to Hue, but you're going to have to get on that C-130 over there, and it's going to land in Phu Bai, which is just south of Hue, and then you're going to be assigned to 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. And they were in Hue at that time.
Now, Hue had been almost completely destroyed during the Tet Offensive. It was occupied by the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, and there was a lot of terrible fighting. A lot of Marines were killed in Hue during that period of time. So you were sent up to that territory, up to that.
Yeah.
Was that essentially the area that you stayed in while you were in Vietnam?
Oh, we traveled all over, but when I disembarked from the plane in Phu Bai, I went up to where their encampment was basically a center where people would get their supplies and so forth. So I went up there and they assigned me to communications platoon. And I went to the field sergeant to get my gun, which I got all my supplies immediately. I didn't have a gun at that point, but I got my pack and my gear and everything I needed. And when I looked at some of the guys that were already there, just coming back from they were up at Hue, they were coming back to get equipment and so forth. They looked about 20 or 30 years older than me. You know, I felt that there was really a distinction between me and them. And then I found out that usually when you get a new guy coming to Nam, nobody really associates with him for a period of time, usually about a month or so, because they figure you're either going to get killed the first month you're there or the last month that you're there in Vietnam. And so people were kind of back away from you because they really didn't want to get to know you that well. And after I got my equipment, there's no street lights or anything in Vietnam. You know, I mean, it's dark. When it gets dark, you can't see your hand in front of you. And the next thing I know, you know, it's dark. I had this cot that I slept on. And next thing I hear is incoming, incoming. Somebody's yelling incoming. So we're getting mortared and rocketed. And I've only been in Vietnam a few hours. And there was a little trench outside of the tent, so I jumped in the tent, and people were jumping on top of me, and people were jumping on top of other guys, and people were yelling. You know, one guy said, "Quit bleeding on me!" To this one guy, and they're just hammering us with rockets and mortars all over the place. And so the next morning, after you get much sleep that night, our captain of the communications platoon, he lines us all up. There might have been maybe 20 of us, if it was 20. He said, I need 3 or 4 volunteers. No, I needed 4 volunteers for a CAG unit. And
CAG being?
It's an acronym, and I can't recall what it stands for, but basically you go out into the villages and you teach the villagers how to defend their villages. And I'd heard about it before I went to Vietnam, and it's basically a suicide mission. So I'm trying to hold my head down. I volunteered for Vietnam, volunteered for the Marine Corps. Certainly don't want to volunteer for a CAG unit. And then after the captain got his people he wanted, the rest of us jumped on one of these big truck, they call it a deuce by truck, and we're headed up the way. And there's all these refugees coming out of Way. You know, it's a muddy road going up there. And so we're all headed up there, the few of us that were on the truck. And we did a variety of different functions while we were there. It just didn't, like I said, I never saw a teletype. I carried a radio, went on search and destroy missions. We got some confidential information that there were 20 NVA divisions around Way. And the rock pile was just a little bit north of Way, and so was Quezon. There was all not too far from each other, Quezon, Way, and so that's where the major fighting was occurring.
Now Way, as I said, was essentially almost destroyed during the Tet Offensive. So when you got there, how badly demolished was the city of Way?
When I got, I went up to what they called 1-5 forward. That's 1st Battalion, 5th Marines forward position. And we were told to dig in. And Way had, a lot of the fighting had just occurred in Way. You know, the urban area within Way, it was almost totally destroyed. You know, and they had a bank just like a city would have a bank, you know, in Way. It was the old proverbial capital of South Vietnam.
And it was a beautiful city prior to
had a
what
university
happened.
in Way too. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, now, when you've been mortared your first few hours in Vietnam, you finally got some equipment. What was your basic personal weapon that you carried with you while you were in Vietnam?
We were all issued M16s.
You know, the M16s have come under criticism by many. Many people that carried M16s, they said that they were hard to clean, easy to jam. What's your impression of the M16? There
was an earlier version of the M16 that caused a lot of problems, and you could tell the difference from the flash suppressor on the barrel, which one was the older model. And what they discovered was the magazines weren't feeding into the chamber of those M16. So we were all told to don't put 20 rounds in the magazine, put 18 rounds, because the spring's not strong enough to shoot the rounds up into the chamber. And that was one of the problems that we were aware of in the M16.
So was your unit issued the earlier version of the M16s and the later versions? Did you have a mixture of the two, or?
I personally had the newer one because they had tried to get the newer model out to the infantry people right away.
Okay.
So the infantry had the newer model.
You've already partially answered this. Were you primarily in a fire base operation, or were you out in the field most of the time, or was it a combination of being in a base of operations and being in the field?
It was a combination of all of that. I went on night patrols. I went on search and destroy missions. Carried a radio. Went out on we called it Snoopy, where we went out 3-man patrols, and we would report back if we saw enemy in the area, not to make any engagement with them, just to report back so they knew where they were.
Now, while you were there, did you have any casualties among your group or your?
We did. One that I don't know why things happen, and he just arrived back. We were up at 1-5 forward. Just arrived back, and it's daylight. He jumps in the tent and lays on a cot, and we received 2 or 3 mortar rounds One round went right through the top of his tent and hit him in the chest. You know, why did that happen? Why in that location? Why that time? You know, he just got back to Vietnam, you know, and you wonder why things happen the way they do. And that was one that still struggle with, you know.
And I think the average age of a person killed in Vietnam was 19 years old.
Yeah.
So, tell us what was your impression of the North Vietnamese troops and the Viet Cong? I suspect that your unit most of the time faced regular North Vietnamese troops, although there probably were some Viet Cong still.
Yeah, yeah. Most of it was North Vietnamese when we were up at
Regular
military personnel. And we did some other operations around Way, south of Way, over in the mountainous areas. We did some operations up there where we discovered a medical, we call it a medical hospital. It was out in a hooch in the middle of nowhere, you know. And when we were up in the northern part of South Vietnam, and then we later moved to a little bit further south where the Ho Chi Minh Trail came in, in that area was mostly VC, but the northern part was pretty much predominant North Vietnamese.
And your impression of them as soldiers?
There's no comparison between VC and the NVA. NVA are regular military people.
And they had many years of fighting, the French, the Japanese, and
the Chinese. For about 1,000 years they've been fighting the Chinese.
So when you were out, tell us about your food rations. When you were out in the field, what were your food rations?
We had sea rats. We called them sea rats, sea rations. And they were manufactured in 1945.
Are you serious?
And that's what we predominantly ate most of the time we were there. We did have at some point some we called them LRPs, which are long-range patrol rats. We did have an opportunity to have them periodically, but the majority of the time it was sea rations.
Now, I ask this question, I inevitably always get the same answer. So I'm going to see if I get the same answer for you. What was the worst? They came in, I think there were 5 different varieties or meal plans of the sea rations. Which one did you like the least?
Well, there's 12 in a case. The ham, and we called them ham and something else, but the ham and beans, we called them ham and mothers, is what we called them. But
that was the least favorite.
That was the least favorite. Even when we were, the Vietnamese kids were begging for food and stuff, we threw them a can of ham and beans, and they'd throw them back at us. You know?
And that's the same answer I get from everybody I always ask about here. The one they like the least is the ham and
I might have been a little strange. I didn't care. I didn't mind them once in a while, but not for a steady diet. Beans and weenies was another favorite, and spaghetti. I think we had the spaghetti in there.
Was the spaghetti comes across? Most people like the spaghetti.
And the beans and weenies, we like those too.
And of course, there are other things in the sea rations. There were little, I think, chewing gum, and
cigarettes,
cracker, and at that time, you're right, cigarettes.
Yeah, they all had a little carton of, I think, 4 cigarettes in a little pack. And we used to use, we get with the engineers, and all the engineers carried C4, you know, explosive to blow down trees when we're out in the bush, and so we get a helicopter coming in, dropping supplies off for us. And so we'd always get a little chunk of C4 from the engineers, and if you light it, it'll burn pretty fast and pretty hot. So we'd put a can on top of it, and that's the way we warmed up our food.
You know, I had there was a infantry officer that we interviewed that talked about warming up his coffee, and he had sat down and figured out how much it cost to warm up a cup of coffee by burning the C4. It came out to $175 a cup, I think. What was you faced both the regular North Vietnam troops, and you faced the Viet Cong, and of course you had the South Vietnamese population that you were. What was your impression of how the South Vietnamese supported the war or did not support the war? Or?
Well, you know, South Vietnam was invaded by North Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh sent the armies down there to invade the South. It's an very agricultural society. People were farmers. They had these little plots of land, where they grew their own rice for hundreds of years. They were farmers, not educated people. And honestly, I don't think they really cared who was in control, whether it was what government controlled them. They weren't concerned about anything except that little plot of land that they had and their water buffalo, if they had one.
And that's about all they had. Was
that's about all
the land and maybe a water buffalo
and a chicken or two.
And
yeah.
So I gather you felt we never really got the full support of the South Vietnamese people because they were concerned about living day to day.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. There was no way I don't think we ever could have got their support. As much as we would like to have got their support, I don't think they really knew and didn't care.
Yeah. Now, while you were in Vietnam, did your opinion about the war change by chance? You volunteered to go to Vietnam. You volunteered for the Marine Corps. So when you got there and got involved, your life was in danger, and the war was going on. 1968, things in the United States, protests were picking up. Did you feel like while you were in Vietnam that the United States was winning the war or not winning the war?
Well, we really didn't know what was happening back in, we called it the country, back in the United States. We didn't have very little communications. You might get a letter back and forth periodically. But there was never any mention in the letters or the correspondence about what was happening, in the USA. So we never had really a global picture of what was happening in Vietnam. On a day-by-day basis, we were living day by day. Our goal was to survive day by day. When I arrived in Vietnam, I weighed 180 pounds. When I left Vietnam, I weighed 135 pounds. It was just survival is all we cared about.
What was your opinion of the South Vietnamese military?
I don't know if I really had a strong opinion about them either way. There was no comparison between them and a U.S. soldier. I mean, or United States Marine. They weren't equal, I think, in comparison as far as fighting ability. But they were there in defense of their country in South Vietnam, and we were there to support them. They were invaded, and that's why we were there.
Now, during your 13 months in Vietnam, did you ever get an R&R? Get a chance to go anywhere?
I did.
Where did you go?
I went to Bangkok. Bangkok, Thailand. Yep.
Did you like Bangkok?
I did.
Thailand was amidst all the Vietnam War, Thailand maintained its beauty, and I did not go to Thailand, but I've heard that people really liked the people. So,
yeah.
How long did you have? A weekend?
It was 5 days that I recall, and you thought about having an opportunity to be swimming in the ocean over there, the sea. I guess it's called a sea, and just being free for that period of time. It was extremely relaxing. Saw a lot of sights over there, rode an elephant, so did the attractions.
Now, when you came back, it got to be a rude awakening again, right? You come back and come back to Vietnam, and they send you back into the jungle. You were up in the I Corps, which is the northern part of South Vietnam,
right.
Which is mountainous, a lot of heavy canopy trees, plus a lot of exotic animals still exist up there.
Right.
Tigers.
Yeah.
A lot of poisonous snakes. I hope you never ran into any of those, did you?
No. I always thought about, when you're jumping in a hole someplace, and about the snakes, and there's a couple over there that could kill you. I mean, are extremely deadly snakes. But thank God I never got bit by a snake. I did get bit by a centipede.
Well, they can hurt too.
Oh, they hurt tremendously. The centipedes over there are like, a foot long. And we were out in the jungle, and I called the corpsman. I said, it bit me on a finger, and next thing I know, my whole arm is numb. And I said, I can't, how am I going to shoot? I can't use my arm, period. He said, well, I can't do anything for you. He said, you're just going to have to wait. And so I said, okay, I'll wait. So,
how long before you could use your arm?
It was probably 6-7 hours at least.
Oh my gosh. So you served your 13 months in country. Then where did the Marine Corps send you after Vietnam?
Well, my 3 years was up at that point. This was in March of 1969, and I was scheduled to be released March 29th. But we get back to the United States. I don't know. We landed in, I think it was an Air Force base in California, and then they loaded us on a bus.
Travis Air Force Base.
May have been Travis, and took us out the gate, and that's where first time I saw people out there picketing against the war. And then, of course, we were in a Marine bus, and we're going down to Camp Pendleton. Of course, there's picketers out there in front of the gate at Camp Pendleton. And so we get on the base, and they said, we're going to separate the groups. Those of you that are getting discharged, which I was in that group, we go over here. And those that still had time to serve in the Marine Corps, they went over there, and of course they went through their orders and see where they're going to go. And then my group that I was assigned to, they said, we're going to get you guys out of here as quickly as we can. We don't want you to leave the base. We're going to muster you out so you can go home as soon as possible. We'll get you out of here in a couple of days.
Now at that point, that was 69.
69.
At that point, the protests, the war were really hot and ramping up. Some military commanders gave orders that you couldn't wear a uniform off base, couldn't wear a uniform while traveling. Did you receive any of those orders, or were you advised?
Well, I think they did discuss the protesters with us, and because we were isolated in Vietnam for that period of time, so we had no idea what was happening in the United States. And so he told us about the protesters, and I don't recall if we wore civilian clothes. I think they transported us to L.A. International Airport, where we could get on private planes, and dropped us off there. And we may have been in civilian clothes then.
Okay, I think at that point, most of the branches of the military were ordering not to wear your, which is a shame.
Yeah.
You look at it now, and it's completely opposite.
Yeah.
People come home. So you got out of the Marine Corps. You were from Pennsylvania. How'd you get to Florida?
Well, my parents relocated here. My dad kind of semi-retired. He still was working, but and I shortly thereafter came here as well. And
you became a Florida Highway Patrolman, is that correct?
I did. My wife Jeannie and I, we met in college. We both eventually graduated from University of Central Florida, and did a little studying at Rawlins for graduate school. But I joined the Highway Patrol in 1972, and I was single. Jeannie and I were engaged, but they sent me after 3 months in Tallahassee sent me to Miami, probably because I was single. So, because nobody wanted to go to Miami, wasn't on the top list.
Now, you while you were a Florida Highway Patrolman, you earned a reputation as a person that busted a number of personnel transporting drugs up and down the highways. You gained a very, very good reputation. Did you have inside information, or had you developed techniques that made you suspicious or of certain things that led you to make all these arrests?
I started charting the arrest I was making and looking at the rest as they continued to be developed. Looking at the similarities between the rest, like the direction of travel, the time of day, the number of occupants. And so I didn't have any information ahead of time. I developed what's called a drug courier profile based on all the characteristics that I assembled. And turned out it was quite successful. And in a period of about a year and a half, I personally seized 3¼ tons of marijuana, cocaine, some heroin.
That was traveling up and down the highways here in Florida?
Traveling, all the seizures were northbound on Interstate 95.
And can you imagine, I mean, you were able to do that, but you can imagine how much didn't get stopped? Oh, yeah. My God. Oh, my God. So here you are.
What was your record when you were the Surgeon General of the state of Florida? You stopped, what, 300 pill mills here in the state of Florida.
Closed up 300 pill mills.
Yeah, and they were killing our kids.
Yeah, they sure were. Yeah, that was when some doctors quit being doctors and became drug dealers. So.
Right.
You have a very good memory, sure. Very good memory. So here you are.
Well, I told you I admired you for a long time.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. You ran for sheriff 1988, got elected, yes, and served until 2001. Is that correct?
That's correct. I had a lot of people helping us on the campaign, including your lovely wife, Peggy. She was instrumental in helping us get in all 3 elections. For 4 years each term, she was there.
And you were very successful as a sheriff. This is a question that I ask everybody, every Vietnam veteran. Looking back now, Vietnam's 50 years ago, and as you look back now and having the perspective of that 50 years, what do you think the United States did right, or did not do right, or did wrong? What is your viewpoint now of the Vietnam War?
Well, for me, it was an honor to serve my country in the Marine Corps. I think the successes I've had subsequent to basic training and my time in the Corps attributed to the training and the physical aspect that we go through and the mental aspect in training. I think we had a right to assist, an obligation to assist when the South Vietnamese were invaded by the North. I think that was the right thing to do. But I don't know if we really had the support, which I doubt, from the people in South Vietnam for us, because as I said earlier, they weren't really committed. They didn't care. It's a agrarian society, so they're poor people. They're not educated. And I think what we did wrong was not trying to win the war.
Well, that's pretty much the answer I get from every Vietnam veteran. Of course, we have the advantage of having 50 years of being able to read books about Vietnam and what went wrong and what didn't go. But everyone has an opinion, and many are like your opinion, Sheriff. So,
well, I remember when I was there, and President Johnson stopped the bombing of North Vietnam, and I can tell you those in our unit, we were really upset. He stopped the bombing. We thought after Way that it was we were pretty much convinced that we won the war after Way. We thought it was over.
And militarily, I think that was correct. But as I said, the Tet Offensive turned the protester, or who was against the war, it became a moral victory for the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese, even though it was a military victory for the United States. And many people that served in Vietnam felt like you did at that time. Well, I want to thank you for your service as a law enforcement officer, your service as a Marine, and thank you for coming here today, Mr. Vogel.
Well, thank you, Dr. Farmer.
Okay.
It was an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is a project authorized by Congress and administered by the Library of Congress. The objective is to record as many as possible interviews with those veterans from World War II to the present. These interviews are archived at the Library of Congress and made available to the public both online and in person. The library also encourages local venues such as historical societies and museums, like the one we're in at the present time, the New Smyrna Museum of History, to keep these videos and make them available to the local population.